Arsenal's women make it to the Champions League final. Can the guys follow suit over the course of the next week? If you're looking for a good omen, we're also up against French opposition, and we could also meet Barcelona in the final. Plus, Liverpool clinch the Premier League title, and we continue to build up to tomorrow night's game on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the pod. Welcome back to the show. Great to see so many of you with us bright and early on this Monday morning. Hope you're all recovering from a pretty good weekend. It was quite nice, wasn't it, to not have a game to stress over, I would argue. But at the same time, it just means that when you haven't got that distraction, you end up, as I kind of alluded to on yesterday's pod, maybe overthinking what's coming on Tuesday night. You try and find other things to do. You try and find other distractions. I was at a game on Saturday, and so that was a nice distraction for a good few hours. But yesterday I was back at home, and yep, we're going to talk about the Champions League semi-final in which the women came up trumps for Arsenal and have booked their place in the Lisbon final, which is incredible. It's the first time in 18 years that Arsenal women have made a Champions League final. And when you think about how sort of special Arsenal women have been in the women's football space, how they've been sort of trailblazers, how they've, really kind of set the standard in so many ways, to not have reached the Champions League final for 18 years, it's not great. So to be back there and to be ready and prepared to go toe-to-toe with a Barcelona side that we know are incredible in the final, I think it signifies and marks partly why I would argue that these are really special times at the football club. And I know that there will be people out there that completely disagree with this. We've already got one in the chat. Rumble says, special times are winning silverware, not lapping up a process. Mate, whatever way you look at it, if you just put your entitlement to one side for a minute, for a football club this day and age to have both of its teams, men's and women, in, really great positions in Europe's premier competition is special. Okay, Arsenal women are in the final. Let's hope that over the course of the next week, the Arsenal men can book their place in the final. And if they manage that, and Arsenal were to end up with two teams in the two Champions League finals, that would be special. That would be unbelievable. And look, people can't park their entitlement. People will find that difficult. That's your problem. It's almost ridiculous, actually, to dismiss how the club have done in the sort of Champions League competitions with both teams so far. Can we make a case that what we've done in the league hasn't been good enough? Yeah, sure. But this kind of goes to show what the power is of a distraction. And if being in Europe's premier competition in the semi-final and final stage with our two teams is a distraction, it's a pretty good distraction, isn't it? You see what I mean? Anyway, look, we'll get into the ins and outs of that a little bit later on. We're also going to react to Liverpool clinching the Premier League title. And of course, we're going to build up to tomorrow night's massive game at the Emirates Stadium. We've got two press conferences, more than two, actually, because we've got the two managers and we'll get a player from each side as well. Now, the press conferences are taking place at Emirates Stadium, early evening for Arsenal and late afternoon for Paris Saint-Germain. I'm going to be down there. I'm going to pop into PSG's open training as well on the Emirates Stadium pitch. I do want to try and get a feel for who's going to start for them in those wing positions in particular, because in my head, it's Doué and Kvaratskhelia, but there's been quite a bit of talk about Luis Enrique maybe going down a slightly different path, at least for the away game. So, yeah, we'll try and make sense of that. We'll listen to what both managers have to say. I think often I take quite a bit away from the press conferences, and I'll get into a little bit about why a little bit later on. Right, shall we start by reacting? Shall we start by reacting to Liverpool's Premier League triumph? Apologies for the cut out in sound. They're not quite sure what occurred. But anyway, let's get into that. So Liverpool won the Premier League title yesterday. Officially, it is over. I mean, it's been over for quite some time. I don't think anybody is surprised by what happened yesterday. And listen, I've said it before on the pod. I'll say it again. Congratulations to Liverpool. Deserved winners in the end. Only lost 2 games all season. Managed to sort of pick up results even when they weren't playing great at times this season. I think that's fair to say. And, it's that old cliche, isn't it, of, that's what champions do. That's what champions do. They find a way. Is there a little bit of disappointment? Actually, more than a little bit. There's quite a bit of disappointment from me, really, with regards to how feeble in the end our title challenge was. But I can also understand why in the last few weeks, when it became very clear that there was zero chance of us turning it around. And I know people will make the argument there was mathematically, but for me, in my mind, it was gone a long time ago. And the fact that it was gone a long time ago meant that we could focus on the Champions League. And that's okay. And people will put up with that if you then go and give a great account of yourselves in the Champions League. And I don't know what more we could have done in kind of response to falling out of the title race, then face the serial European Cup winners in Real Madrid, the team with some of the best players in the world, the club with probably the most aura in world football. We've beaten them 5-1 over 2 legs. And the goal that we conceded, we gifted them. So I don't think Arsenal could have done anything more in terms of saying it's not gone the way we wanted it to go in terms of the Premier League, but we're going to really focus on something else. And we're going to put everything into that. And naturally, there comes a decline and a bit of a drop-off in other games and in other competitions. And you've seen that in the Premier League in recent weeks. We've made changes to our team at times, not as many as maybe some people would have made, but we have made changes. You've seen a drop-off in terms of some of the performances as a result of that. You've seen players going into games even subconsciously thinking about what's to come in midweek in these huge European nights. Completely understandable. Basically, long story short, I made my peace with the fact we're not going to win the league a long time ago. So when Liverpool won it yesterday, I didn't really feel anything. In fact, I started the day by watching Italian football. I watched Inter against Roma because that was a really important game in terms of the Scudetto race. Turned out to be huge. Inter losing to Roma before Napoli went on and won later on in the evening. And that puts them in the box seat now to go on and win the Scudetto with a few games remaining. So I was watching that. But when it got to 4:30, I actually put on the Forest Manchester City game in the Cup. I thought that would be a better spectacle. I don't want to watch Liverpool celebrating. I don't want to watch Liverpool cruising to victory. And I certainly don't want to watch Tottenham Hotspur if I don't have to. So, I put on the Forest City game, and then City scored after like 2 minutes. And I thought, here we go. That's that one ruined. And then I heard that Tottenham were 1-0 up at Anfield. So I flicked that on. And very shortly afterwards, Liverpool equalised. And from that moment on, I stopped watching it. I haven't seen any of the celebrations. I haven't seen barely anything on social media. I'm not going to do that thing that I've seen some Arsenal fans doing online where they go, oh, look, Liverpool have won the league, but nobody cares. No, people care and Liverpool care. The problem is that there wasn't that interest from the kind of wider football audience for quite some time because it's been apparent that they were sort of walking towards it for ages. They didn't really have to work for it. And that's no fault of their own. I'm not trying to take anything away from Liverpool. Please don't take it like that. It's an unbelievable achievement. To win the Premier League title always is. To do it in Arne Slot's first season is really special. And to do it having picked up a team that Jurgen Klopp, one of the greatest ever to do it in the Premier League, couldn't get a tune out of towards the end of his days. That says so much about Arne Slot and his ability to kind of pick up a team from a difficult position and get them going and get them firing again. So congratulations to Liverpool. I promise I'm not trying to take anything away. There's no bitterness. There's no sadness. I think we've all seen in recent weeks what the power is of a really exciting distraction. And that's what the Champions League is for us. And while we're in the Champions League, I'm not going to dwell too much on what's happened in the Premier League. It's done. Line drawn underneath it. Can't go back. Can't change it. Hopefully we go again next season and we put a strong challenge in and get over the line. But for now, it really is all eyes on the Champions League. And so when I say I didn't watch any of it yesterday, I didn't watch Liverpool lifting the trophy. I didn't watch any of the celebrations. I mean, I don't even know if they lifted the trophy yesterday. That's how much I've been across it. I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they'll leave that for the last home game of the season. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that just goes to show you, doesn't it, how disconnected I was with it yesterday. But they celebrated it. They had a party at Anfield, and I was not interested in the slightest. And they will love it, and congratulations to them again. It's the last time I'll say it, but, for me, it just goes to show that even though we've woken up on this Monday morning, having officially failed to win the title yesterday, I'm still smiling and I'm still buzzing because we've got a Champions League semi-final on the horizon. So, this is the thing about football, man. You can choose to consume it in whichever way you prefer. You could either wake up this morning pissed off and angry and frustrated at the fact that Liverpool have been crowned Premier League champions, when in theory, given City's drop-off, this should have been our year. Or you can put a smile on your face. You can choose to be glass half full rather than glass half empty, and you can be buzzing with the fact that we are in that semi-final and we've got a great chance of making it through to the final in Munich. And there's the opportunity to potentially sort of replay that match against Barcelona in a Champions League final. And hopefully, if we can get there first and they get there as well, hopefully we can get some revenge for 2006. There's a lot to be excited about, man. There's a lot to be excited about. So let's enjoy it. When I say these are special times at Arsenal, there's pushback on that in the chat, of course, and that's fine. You can have a different opinion, not an issue for me. But if you are in charge of the sporting operation at Arsenal, and I know we've got a lot of work to do against PSG, and believe me, there's no guarantee that we get through. I would say it's as 50-50 as these ties could possibly be. But if we did get through and you're in charge of the sporting operation at Arsenal and you have to report into your bosses and they're going to assess kind of your performance and they're going to assess, how you've done. Yeah, okay, there'll be room for improvement in the kind of domestic section of the review. But to have a men's team potentially and a women's team in the Champions League final is out of this world impressive. And so while I can accept that we haven't done very well in other competitions, and I mean, we did go to a League Cup semi-final, people seem to have completely ignored that. But the fact that we are where we are, it's not even debatable. It is impressive. So let's enjoy it for what it is. The post-mortem can take place at the end of the season. The post-mortem can be done when the season's over. For now, just enjoy the ride. There ain't many games left. We've got 3 games left, hopefully. Hopefully it's not just the 2, but we've got 3 games left where, we're going to be all in. So let's enjoy them. Let's lap them up. Let's see where it takes us. Let's enjoy the journey. Let's enjoy the ride. If you're one of those people that is constantly moaning and whinging, and there is a few of them in this chat, normally the same old faces, then do you even want Arsenal to win? I don't understand. Are you going to be sitting there bragging to your mates that Arsenal won the Champions League if they do go on to achieve that? Or are you going to be sitting there going, well, that's what they're supposed to do because everyone keeps telling me they've got an elite manager and an elite squad, blah, blah. So I'm not going to enjoy this one bit. I'm not going to lap it up. I'm not going to take any pleasure from it at all because instead I'm going to say, nope, that was the bare minimum because I want to portray this image that I've got standards and no one else has. If you can't get excited over sport and if you can't get excited over, potential success and the journey that you have to go along to get to that point while you're in the heat of it, then what the hell is the bloody point, mate? You might as well go and sit and watch Songs of Praise on a Sunday on BBC One with the old biddies because, you're just sucking the fun out of everything. Honestly, man. Honestly, it's weird to me. It is genuinely weird to me. Anyway, Liverpool clinched the title. Congratulations to him. And we move on. Let's talk a little bit then about the Arsenal women's success yesterday in the Champions League. Because I got to be honest, listen, I'm not the biggest follower of women's football. I admit that. And there's people out there that are way more qualified to to sort of analyze and reflect on a big game like that and a big moment like that. But I do have an opinion on it. We're going to talk about it, and yeah, let's do that next. Okay, so look, after the first leg against Lyon, knowing what I know about Lyon and their history in that competition and sort of the force they are in sort of women's football, when Arsenal lost the first leg, I thought they were done. I got to be honest. And maybe that is because I don't have the same depth of knowledge around the women's game as a lot of others. Maybe there were others that felt that, you know, it was possible. It wasn't the biggest deficit. Obviously, it was just the one goal going into the second leg. Lyon had won 2-1. But you did feel like, you know, it was going to be really, really difficult to go over to France and overturn that. Joe Montemurro, who is the Lyon manager and was previously the Arsenal manager, he said quite sort of categorically after the first leg, this is not over. And I think he was a little bit frustrated by maybe the picture that was being painted around his side, whereby their history meant that it was almost unthinkable that this could happen, that they could collapse in the way that they did. Listen, Lyon were bad from what I saw. And you know, that's not something you say very often about them, but the opposition still has to be good enough to take advantage of that. I thought Arsenal were a little bit lucky with the way that the first goal came about, a little bit scrappy. But then Mariona Caldente scores a stunning goal to make it 2-0 on the day. And from then on, you just felt like that just breeded confidence, didn't it, within the Arsenal team? And they were then, for the remainder of the game, really kind of potent when they needed to be. They were efficient in the final third. They capitalized on Lyon mistakes and made sure they took full advantage of them, which was obviously great to see. And by the time Lyon pulled the goal back, they just had too much to do and it was done. As I said right at the top of the show, Arsenal women are a powerhouse in the women's game. Yet they've not been in the Champions League final for 18 years. And that is huge. That is a huge amount of time, which again plays into my point that I was making earlier on. When I say these are special times for the football club, you have to acknowledge that if you, for example, right, people will sit there and they'll slag off Mikel Arteta, right? But what they won't do is take into account that the last time we made a Champions League final, and we haven't done that yet on the men's side, but we're in with a shout. The last time that happened was in 2006. That's nearly 20 years ago. On the women's side, you know, and on the women's side, I'd argue this is even more astonishing because of how successful they've been generally, but also how much bigger they are as a club in terms of their support and the following versus all the other women's clubs in this country. The fact that they haven't got there for 18 years, despite their advantages because they're such a big side, that shows you that these things shouldn't be taken for granted and they're not a given. So if you fail to do something for 18, nearly 20 years, depending on which team specifically we're talking about now, the fact that you are in with a shout, and in the women's case, you've already done it, you've got there to the final, that is huge. That is huge. And I don't understand why people don't acknowledge that. Like Newcastle United, for example, right, winning the Carabao Cup. It's the Carabao Cup, right? I'm sure when the Saudis took over at Newcastle United, they had much bigger ambitions in mind than winning the League Cup and the EFL Cup. But look at how long it's been since Newcastle last won a trophy. The longer you've gone without something, the more significant the achievement becomes when you manage it. And that's why the Geordies were lapping it up and they enjoyed it as much as they did. They want to win more than the Carabao Cup, than the EFL Cup. When they got the new ownership come in, they thought they were going to go out and sign all the biggest and best players in the world. And obviously, for reasons beyond their control, that's not been able to happen because of PSR and all the rest of it. But again, the point I make is that when you go without something for a while, when you do then manage to achieve it, it is huge. And so these are special times for this football club because the women are in the final. And listen, I make Barcelona favourites. Again, from my limited knowledge of women's football, I'm very aware of how strong Barcelona are, have been, and continue to be. So, I wouldn't sit here and say that Arsenal have won the Champions League on the women's side, and I wouldn't say that with the men. We haven't even made the final yet. But the point I'm trying to make is that we are in contention for the biggest prize in the men's game, club-wise, and for the biggest prize in the women's game, club-wise. So this is a position that we could have only dreamed of over the last 15 or so years. So when I say these are special times for the football club, I'm fully justified in saying that. And you can pour cold water on it if you like. You can be a miserable so-and-so and pretend that it's not good and it's not impressive if you like. That's up to you. But I don't choose to consume football that way. Football is the love of my life. It's like being married, right? It's like being married. Everybody's wife does one or two things that irritate them. Do you choose to look at those one or two things and say, no, I don't want to be with you? Or do you choose to love them for all the good things? You choose to love them for all the good things. That's how you choose to go through relationships in life. You have a relationship with your football club. It takes up a big part of our life. We talk about it all the time. We listen to content around it all the time. We go and see it. We make it a really central part of our lives. I think for me, it's undeniable that Arsenal are in a great place as a football club right now. It's not perfect, but what's perfect? Even when we went the season unbeaten, even when we went 49 games unbeaten, right? That long stretch. I remember sort of when we won the Premier League title, and people have said this on many occasions with hindsight. People will say, yeah, but the Invincibles weren't that good, because they drew 12 games. They went the whole season unbeaten. So you can choose to look at it in two ways. You get what I'm trying to say here? Do you get the point I'm trying to make? You can look at it and say they went the season unbeaten, unbelievable achievement. Or when comparing them to some of the other great teams of the Premier League era, you can go, yeah, but they drew 12 games, which isn't very good. And so you can seek to basically piss on their achievement because you choose to look at it through a negative lens. Perspective is everything. And, we want to get over the line. Of course we do. And I wish the women all the best of luck. I'm desperate to see the men go on and win the Champions League. Obviously, we've got to get past PSG first, and that isn't going to be easy. But there's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot to be excited about. And I was chatting to a mate of mine this morning. He's a Tottenham fan, right? And he basically put it this way. He said, look, the power of distractions is clear and evident for you to see, because I've woken up this morning as a Tottenham fan, having watched us concede our 15th goal to Liverpool yesterday and get battered again. But I'm not okay with it, not happy with it, but I'm excited for what the week brings because we've got a Europa League semi-final. And he said, you as an Arsenal fan have just watched Liverpool clinch the title that you've been desperate for over the last few years. And again, you're not happy about it, but you're okay with it, or you're content with the situation, or at least you're excited for the week to come because you're in a Champions League semi-final. It just goes to show, doesn't it, the power of these things. And football is more than just what you do in your domestic league. There are a lot of fans. I was chatting to Dan Bardell, who's an Aston Villa fan, and we were doing the show together on TalkSport 2 on Friday, and we were having a debate about Aston Villa. And I said, look, as much as I think that, Unai Emery's done a really good job at Aston Villa, I actually think it's imperative that they get in the Champions League again if they're to really kind of progress as a football club. I think we see a lot of clubs qualify for the Champions League on kind of one-offs, and that's great because it gives you a bit of a cash injection. It allows you to bring in players during that period of time. But very often those clubs that aren't well resourced enough or haven't been there for a long, long time, or maybe don't have that experience on how to handle it, what ends up happening is their standard then drops the next season because they find it really difficult to balance that and the domestic demands. And then they end up in a position where they drop even further. To really kick on as a football club, for me, you have to qualify for the Champions League consistently. You need those revenues to be coming in consistently. That makes you competitive financially with some of the biggest clubs in the world. And if you are a club that has had PSR issues in the not so distant past, Aston Villa being one of them, Newcastle United being another, that can really go a long way in easing that, right? And Dan Bardell, who's a massive Aston Villa fan, broadcaster, you've seen him on Sky, Talksport, whatever. He said to me, yeah, but as a fan, I'd rather win the FA Cup. And that kind of really highlighted to me that sometimes the objective of a fan isn't always the same as the objective of the club. And it also kind of hammered home the point that, you can just look at things through a different perspective. For me, and I've said this for years, so this is not me sort of backtracking or changing my view or outlook on this because Arsenal are in the Champions League semi-final but have lost the Premier League title by miles. I've always said that at the start of pretty much every season since the Invincibles, if you offered me the Champions League or the Premier League, I'm taking the Champions League. Because I want to see Arsenal be crowned champions of the continent. I want to see Arsenal achieve something they've never achieved before. They've won the league as Invincibles. It don't get much better than that. That is ticked off on my checklist of life. Now, if they could become European champions, that's another thing that I will just be over the moon about and I will hold on to and enjoy for the remainder of my life. So, I choose to be excited about the Champions League and not allow the disappointment of what happened in the Premier League to drag me down and to impact my enjoyment of this, because this is what I've always wanted. So I can't sit here and now be like, oh, well, I'm not going to enjoy this Champions League semi-final, or I shouldn't enjoy it because guess what? Liverpool won the league. All right, whatever. It's done now. I was upset before. I'm not anymore. We move forward. That's the great thing about football. There's always another season. But this thing of like, and we get it in the fan base a lot. And look, there isn't much to really kind of go into outside of this today because we've brought you 2 comprehensive preview podcasts of the PSG game, which you guys can listen to, and I'll point you in the direction of those very, very shortly before we take questions and thoughts. But I think this thing about like standards FC, which you get from a lot of our supporters, where it's like, well, I was around when Thierry Henry done this, and therefore I don't accept anything less than that. That for me is people taking a conscious decision to basically completely ignore the wider context. And it's a failure to understand that football can be cyclical, that football changes really, really quickly. And 1 or 2 bad decisions can put you on the bad foot for one or, for longer than you'd ever probably imagine. Let's say you go into a summer and you feel like you're 1 player away or 2 players away from winning the title. Got a big transfer budget. You go into the summer, you spend 150 million quid on 2 players. You bring them in. One of them gets injured and one of them fails to perform at the level that you've come to expect. All of a sudden, where you were 2 players away, you might be now, even further behind because the team that you're chasing has improved or whatever. These are just examples of how football can change really, really quickly. And, we missed out on Champions League qualification the first time. And I remember going, it's all right, we'll be back next year. And then the next year came around and we missed out again. And then we missed out again and again and again and again. I never in my wildest dreams, at the point where we missed out on the Champions League the first time, thought we'd be out of the competition for as long as we were. And that taught me a lesson. That taught me a lesson about our sport, taught me a lesson about football, it taught me a lesson about how if you make a mistake and it's a really bad one and a costly one, and then you try desperately to rectify that mistake by going and doing something equally as rash and equally as poorly thought out, then you can end up falling further and further and further behind. So having been out of the Champions League for all of that time, having gone on this incredibly long journey to get ourselves back into it, to now be where we are, I'm chuffed, really, really chuffed. I'm really excited. And I can't wait to see what the next couple of weeks brings for us. Can we continue that journey on to Munich? We shall see. We shall see. As I mentioned, we're going to hear from Mikel Arteta and we're going to hear from Luis Enrique a little bit later on. And I'll bring you a sort of short reaction pod later this evening, so Monday evening. I might do it from Emirates Stadium if I find a quiet spot. If not, I'll do it as soon as I get back. But we're going to hear from both the managers. We're going to hear from some players. We'll get a little look at PSG, its first 15 minutes of training. I'm not going to go to the Arsenal one because it would mean me going to London Colney and then coming back to the Emirates. So I'm not going to do that. And I've been to a fair few of those recently, so I know what they're all about. Basically, the Arsenal players come out. You stand there as journalists trying to figure out, is anyone missing? And then when you realize that pretty much everyone you expected to be is there, they start doing a few kick-ups, put a bit of music on in the background. And by the time they're actually ready to get into the kind of nitty-gritty of it all and the real sort of detailed pieces and anything that could potentially give you potentially give you a sort of hint is done later, they send you home. So yeah. Anyway, forget about that. Okay. Yeah, we'll bring you some updates from the Emirates Stadium a little bit later on. I'll give you a feeling of what the mood is like as well, because I always find Mikel Arteta fascinating in these press conferences. I think you can gauge a lot about how confident the group is from Mikel Arteta. I've certainly felt that ahead of Madrid. And that obviously then translated onto the pitch, didn't it? So I'm really excited to hear him speak ahead of this game. And I want to try and gauge Luis Enrique's feelings as well ahead of a massive, massive game. Anyway, should we take some questions before we wrap up? We'll do 5-10 minutes or so of your questions. Let's do that in just a second, but let me just point you in the direction of some recent content that we've done on the Chronicles of Aguna that I think you guys will enjoy. So going back to Friday, I sat down with the fantastic Adrian Clark. We did this live on Friday morning, and we discussed the game against PSG in detail. We talked a lot about some of the tactical battles we expect to see, some of the selection questions, and we took some of your questions from the live chat at the time. And we've had an unbelievable response to that episode. So please, if you are looking for some really good preview content, it's not because of me, it's because of Adrian. Go back and check that one out. It's called Talking Arsenal versus PSG with Adrian Clark. If you're a YouTube viewer, you will see it on your YouTube feed, on the YouTube channel. If you are an audio listener, it will be on your feed. So just scroll back a couple of episodes. The next day, sorry, not the next day, but on the Sunday morning, I did another piece, 3 things to look out for when Arsenal face PSG. Now, this was just based on me having some thoughts over the weekend about how the game might play out, what are the key areas. So you can go back and you can check that out as well. And we're going to upload a couple of YouTube shorts over the course of the next 24 hours, which will be cuts from some of those shows. If you prefer to take some of it in a kind of shorter form. Also, you can give me a follow on Instagram at Harry_Symeou or on TikTok at Harry Symeou as well, where we'll be posting those up as well. So yeah, lots to come, lots available to you already in terms of the PSG game. And we're going to bring you, as I say, some reaction to those press conferences a little bit later on in the day. Don't forget to like this video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're brand new. All of that stuff really, really does help. And if you're listening to us on audio, especially on Apple, because we lost a load of reviews, please do leave us a review. That stuff really, really, really does help. And we're on the road to 40,000 subscribers here on YouTube. We've got 39,143 right now. So we surpassed that 39K mark that we were looking to do over the weekend quite comfortably in the end. And yeah, we're well on the road now to try and get to 40K as soon as possible. That is on YouTube. That doesn't include all the wonderful people that listen on Spotify and Apple and all the rest of it. And I think the number over those sides is probably quite similar, if not slightly more. So building up a pretty good community, which I'm incredibly proud of. So thank you for all your support and love around the show. Okay, should we take some of your questions? Shall we take some of your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you guys in the live chat. Let's do that right after this, shall we? Okay, what have people got to say? Scrolling through. Afsar says, tomorrow, Harry, would you play Zinchenko as a number 8 and use Marino up front? Or would you play Trossard up front with Marino as the 8? We will need pace up there. Partey missing is the biggest blow. Yeah, look, the closer we get to the game, the more frustrated I am with Thomas Partey losing his rag at the end of that game against Real Madrid, to be honest with you. I am human, right? I've lost my rag before. I've lost my temper before. We all have. And so I don't want to make too big of a thing of it. I don't think that will be right. But yeah, it's a big blow. And the fact that it was unnecessary, like if he made a sliding challenge to prevent a counter attack at a critical part of the game and picked up a booking, you just put your hands up and you go, fair enough. But this wasn't that. So that's what makes it quite irritating and quite annoying. But in answer to your question, I'm going Marino as 8 and Trossard up front. I don't want Zinchenko anywhere near this game. Not because I don't think technically he's a good footballer. I think skill-wise, technique-wise, vision-wise, he's got a lot going for him. And there may be a scenario at some stage where that is what I would do. But I'll be honest with you, I just don't trust him defensively. I don't trust him. I don't trust him, from a sort of work rate perspective. And for that reason, I don't want him in the team. I don't think we can afford to carry that kind of passenger in a game like this one. So, yeah, I'm just having a scroll through because I got some of you sent me some stuff on X last night when I put a post out saying I couldn't sleep because of the match. So I'm just going to maybe pick out a couple of bits from there as well. Bear with me a second. Let's pick a couple of those out. In fact, let me load that while that loads up. Let's go back to the live chat over here. I think there's a lot of back and forth in the chat due to some of the negativity that is coming through. I mean, listen, guys, like you want to be negative, like it's cool, man. Like that's your prerogative. But this is not the place where we're going to sit there and sort of lap that up. So there are other places. You know where they are. You can head over to those should you wish. Somebody asked about the times of the press conferences. I think I've just lost the question, but I'll just give you a little bit of a steer on that. So Mikel Arteta's press conference is due to take part this evening from around, it says from 7 p.m. and they're going to put up a player as well from 6:30. We don't know who that player is yet, or at least I don't know who that player is yet. So we'll see. But yeah, those are going to be in the evening. Luis Enrique's one's at 4:40 it's scheduled for, but whether these start on time remains to be seen. Okay, what else have we got? Here we go. Here's another one. Gatman Stav. Special times. The day after you lost the league, you were supposed to win. Mate, if we win the Champions League, nobody gives a shit about the fact that we haven't won the Premier League because it will be easily the greatest achievement in Arsenal's history, even more than becoming invincibles, in my opinion. Champions of Europe. If we were able to manage that, who cares? Guitar Solo says, any indication of how far off Kai Havertz is? Honestly, mate, I've got no idea. I think he'll be back before the end of the season, or at least back in the picture. Whether that is, Kai Havertz ready to take part in a competitive game, or whether it's just Kai Havertz returning to the training field, I don't know. We kind of have learned, I would say, over the last few sort of years under Mikel Arteta, that the club like to keep this type of thing close to their chest. And often, by the time we learn of a player's availability or return, they've actually been back in the picture for a little while. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's further down the line than maybe we're led to believe at the minute. But I couldn't tell you he's going to be back for X game or Y game or back at all even. But there is a feeling that, he's recovered a lot quicker than people expected. He's working incredibly hard to try and get himself back fit and available ASAP. And that is obviously huge. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. RC, what does RC? Who's RC? Sorry, am I being stupid here? I'm really bad at these abbreviations. Any reports on RC. Is that Ricardo Calafiori? Is that what you're asking? I don't know. Again, another one. I don't know. Like, I expect us to get updates today on a few players. So Ben White, is one that we're obviously a little bit nervous about because of his lack of participation against Palace. Mikel Merino is another one, and I think Mikel Merino is the real big one in terms of needing a player to come back. Calafiori, don't know again. Hopefully we get an update on him. But there's a fair few players, isn't there, that we're worried about and we're concerned about. And again, that kind of feeds into what we were talking about earlier on. We have got to this stage with a lot of problems. And that's something that I'm not going to say you should celebrate. I'm not saying you should celebrate before you've won. I'm not saying that. But you should acknowledge the size of the achievement in getting to where we are right now. And everybody, man, all the negative people, all the naysayers, the type of people that are unfortunately flooding this chat from time to time now, they all said, Real Madrid, you're having a laugh. They're going to batter Arsenal. They're going to blow them out of the water. It'll be done and dusted nice and early on. Some people said we'd lose the first leg 3-0, and we went and won it 3-0. But those people are the same people that have written us off every single time that they've had the opportunity to do so. And they will argue, well, you've not won anything. So, actually us writing you off was justified. But what they don't mention in a lot of cases is that these people that were writing us off, they were so harsh in their criticism and so over the top in their analysis. They would say things like, Arteta's a championship level manager. And then he went on and challenged for the Premier League title. They'll tell you that Arsenal were going to finish 6th in the league and that we were going to go out of the Champions League to Real Madrid. And we're going to finish 2nd, worst case, probably 3rd. And we've got a great chance of making the Champions League final. So even though they will argue that that falls short of their standards, what they don't tell you is that their prediction was completely fucking wrong. And even if it was, still along the lines of like, we're not going to win anything. It was they had us so far off where we actually were that for me, they lose credibility anyway. If you said Arsenal are going to finish 7th or 8th and they finish 2nd, then your prediction is bollocks. You can't hide behind the fact that they didn't win anything and use that as justification of your prediction. Your prediction was miles off. And let's not hide from that, right? Let's not dance around that. Anyway, this is a good one. From Wesbird. Are you concerned about the mistakes that have creeped into Saliba's game recently, Harry? And why do you think that has happened? Difficult to say why it's happened. It has concerned me a little bit. It has worried me. As Adrian Clark said on our show the other day, sometimes it's good to make mistakes when the mistakes don't really matter because it just sharpens you up again. It just fine-tunes you that little bit more going into those massive games. And hopefully that is the case and it works that way. I was really disappointed with the one at the Bernabeu because, we hadn't given him a sniff outside of that. But I also partly blame David Raya for that one because I thought from his position, he should have seen that actually that was the wrong pass to play at that time. And sometimes I think as a centre-half, you ain't got eyes in the back of your head. You can have a glance over your shoulder before you receive it, but the picture can change really quickly. And I think it's on the goalkeeper who can see everything unfolding in front of them to make sure they make the right decision and do things right. The one against Palace was worse for me because I thought that he was more culpable on that occasion. But yeah, I'm just hoping that he kind of wakes up a little bit from that. Like it's unusual for William Saliba to make those kind of errors, but it has been that type of season for him. It's not been as good as Gabriel, I didn't think. And that's why when we lost Gabriel, a lot of us sort of had the discussion around who would you rather lose? Because that's kind of natural conversation that preceded the events. And a lot of us said, well, I'd have probably rather lost Saliba because A, we felt that the cover in the right centre-back position was stronger. And B, because Gabriel has been immense all season. And maybe William Saliba has just been a little bit off it at times. But listen, overall in the Bernabeu, he was fantastic. It was just that one moment. He marshaled Kylian Mbappe, I thought, for so much of that game to perfection. that I don't want to stick the boot in too hard. But am I worried about it? A little bit. But I think that's natural because we've recently seen those mistakes occur. It doesn't mean they're going to happen again, but I think you're always going to have that in the back of your mind because of that whole recency factor. Let's take one more before we sign off. I'll take this one from Taha, who says, if Zubimendi is a Jorginho replacement, does that mean there will be a Partey replacement coming in as well? Well, that's if Thomas Partey leaves. Because we heard last week, didn't we, that contract talks are underway. So, look, I've always said that, there's been this kind of obsession around what we do up front, so much so that we've probably sort of overlooked the fact that given it was likely that both Jorginho and Partey were going to leave, that we'd need a midfield rebuild as well. I think what Arsenal would be doing if they did sign up Thomas Partey to another contract would be protecting themselves against having to do a complete rebuild in one summer. And I think there'd be an element of it whereby they've looked at it and gone, do you know what? Keep Thomas Partey for a little bit longer and let's manage this situation in a slightly smarter way. Let's make that transition from the Jorginho Partey experience 6 options. Let's manage it a little bit more cautiously and carefully. And Partey might not be the guy that starts every week next season, even if he does stay at the football club, but he'd still be there. He'd be able to share the role with Martin Zubimendi, for example, or Declan Rice if, he's in the picture as well, as a 6, that is. I think Zubimendi's coming in. It looks that way. Jorginho's leaving. It certainly looks that way. If Partey stays, then I think maybe we don't go and get another midfielder. If he goes, though, we absolutely have to bring one in for sure. So I think Arsenal are probably at the point now where they're weighing up whether it's worth giving Thomas Partey that contract. People will say it's too much money and because of his injury history, etc., etc. But then you've got to weigh that up against what it would cost to bring someone else in. And it's not that you're not going to incur that cost further down the line, but the question is, do you have other priorities? And therefore, would you rather reduce that cost now instead of having to outlay another 40, 50 million quid and pay someone the salary that Thomas Partey is getting or close to? I think that's what they'll be doing. I think they'll be weighing up their options because I don't think anybody really wants to go into a summer having ripped out their entire midfield and having to build it again from scratch. I think continuity is important, and I think that's probably how they're going to look at it. Right, I am going to love you and leave you all. Thank you so much for joining me on this Monday morning. We'll bring you another episode a little bit later on. We'll be reacting to the press conferences and all the rest of it. We'll bring you something on Tuesday morning as well, for sure. Lots to come on the Chronicles of a Gooner over the next 24, 48 hours. We'll also bring you reaction to the PSG game on Wednesday morning, bright and early, normal time, 10 a.m. So come and join me for that. If I could just ask you, though, before we sign out, because there's loads of you in the live chat. If you haven't done so already, guys, please leave a like on the video. Can we hit 100 likes? I'd be really appreciative if we could get there. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That really, really does help. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or the likes, please leave us a review and all the rest of it. Arsenal's women have made the UEFA Champions League final. Let's hope the men can follow suit over the course of the next, week and a half. As for Liverpool winning the title, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't care, but if we do what we need to do across Tuesday and next Wednesday, I don't think I'll be dwelling on it for too much longer. I'll catch you all very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great day.